Good afternoon and welcome to all of you. It's really nice to see you all here on this lovely Sunday afternoon. And what a beautiful topic that's going to be explored today, for the love of the divine. And I'd just like to welcome you all on behalf of the Brahma Kumaris, which is one of the organisations that's hosting this event. I'm co-hosting with someone else from another organisation, and they will introduce that. So on behalf of the Brahma Kumaris they're in this building, and we're very pleased that you all came to Global Corporation House. So my role today is to MC with Marcus Braybook, who will come up in a minute. And the aim is just to take you through the day. You've got a programme, and the programme stays in two parts. We're going to have a conversation with some very experienced people who have dedicated their lives, each in their own way, to the divine, and so they're going to share from their own perspective. And we also have in the afternoon a very beautiful programme, which is music, song, dance, poetry, all dedicated to the divine. So when that part of the programme comes, we'll introduce that again. So I think it's going to really be a wonderful afternoon. So anyway, enjoy it, take what you need from it to enhance your own lives. It's just housekeeping things, that if in the event of a fire, and I've been here for 20 years and there hasn't been one so far, am I standing in the wrong place? That's better, isn't it? No, I can come a bit more, but I'll be on the speaker soon. Stage. So just to let you know that if, in the case of a fire, that the ushers will guide you. I mean, there are the green signs which you follow, but the ushers will guide you on the way out, so you can sit and relax because they will tell you what to do. The other thing is, I'm going to just request if everyone could check their mobiles just to see that they're on silent or off, depending on what you want to do. And the other thing I'd like, as you probably saw when you came in, that there's this very beautiful exhibition downstairs with some beautiful colours and images. And it's called For the Love of the Divine, and it's by Kathleen Dutton. So there's a leaflet with it which has some websites that you can explore. But do take some time to look at that exhibition, it's very beautiful. So, just invite Marcus.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to welcome you on behalf of the World Congress of Faiths. I was thinking of your warning about the fire. In the Christian church, the earliest meeting was on Pentecost, and all the disciples of Jesus received to have tongues of fire upon them. And instead of, I suppose, rushing for the emergency exits, they realised it was the experience of God in their midst. So when we ignore the safety instructions, and when we decide God has descended, I leave you to discover. But anyway, I'm very glad to welcome you. Just to say really one word about the World Congress of Faiths. It was founded in 1936, and it was really grew out of an experience Francis' young husband had when he was in Tibet. And it was a mystical experience where he felt absolutely overwhelmed by the love of God. And he therefore said afterwards, "No, I could no longer feel enmity for anyone." Well, so we'll be, I think, all of us sort of sharing our experiences, learning from each other. And I would again like to say thank you to the Brahma Kumaris for their hospitality. It's been a long partnership. I was thinking back today to 1993, the year of interreligious understanding and cooperation, when we had that long and wonderful ceremony to start. And of course, Daddy Janki is one of the patrons. Anyhow, thank you very much. I'm not sure who I'm meant to have this.
And actually, that event, that interreligious event back in 1993, is one of the first events that I came to, because I came here in 1992, so that was one of the early events I came to, and it was wonderful. So really, what we're going to do now is we're going to watch a little film called Chasing God, and this film was produced by an Australian film producer called Lenny de Vries. And so enjoy these clips from that. celebrate their relationship with the divine. And even just watching that film gives us a little insight to so many ways. And it's going to be really refreshing to hear also people's personal experience of that journey. So I'd like to introduce two people. One is Liz Edmonds, and she's going to come up in a moment and explain. Liz Edmonds is the founder of this, something called Just This Day. It's an annual event that has been going since 2007. And it's about celebrating moments of silence or stillness during the day. So she'll explain a bit more of that. And also Anne Malone, where is she? Anne Malone is there on the Tibetan bowls, and Anne, I think, is a very frequent visitor here. And she is a songwriter and plays many different instruments, some quite unusual instruments as well. So she's joined us today, and she likes to inspire through her music and songs. That's her aim. So Liz, please come.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to the Brahma Kumaris. One of the marks of coming here is the generosity and the hospitality which is so freely given. And in my view, this generosity and open-heartedness comes from the way the Brahma Kumaris turn inward before they turn outward. And the program they've laid on for us today is very much like that. We will have moments of stillness and silence, and then we'll have this wonderful expression through your speakers, speaking about their faith, expression through song, expression through the art. Now, Just This Day, which happens this year on Wednesday, has its central event at St. Martin in the Fields in London. Anybody is very welcome to come. It's a daytime event in the morning, and we have 5 speakers, ranging from Father Lawrence Freeman from the Christian meditation movement to Jeremy Sinclair, who works for M&C Saatchi. He's the chairman of M&C Saatchi. We have Mr. Rajinder Singh Sandhu from the Guru Nanak Sikh Academy. We have Claire Foster, who's about to go to Westminster Abbey to run the institute there, and Paul Sternberg for Action for Happiness. So in between moments of silence and meditation there, they will speak about how stillness, they find that to be the ideal point of their creative life. And in the evening there's a concert at St. James's Piccadilly. But Just This Day is just a tiny token in a big world of the search for unity. And look at all these heroes here who've been standing for unity for so long. For me, Just This Day being something that allows you to focus inwardly and remember that you are no different to your neighbour, is how we should live every day of our lives. The impulse to bring people together and to suggest that round the world people celebrated it came from hearing a teacher speak of the power of meditation, which he said on the causal level is the one thing which will help society. And we live in troubled times. The search for happiness is often misdirected, so people run to all sorts of external ways of finding happiness. And people who can manifest the goodness of God in their lives are like gold dust. So what a place to be where we are amongst these golden people. Today the program will allow us to turn inward, to become still and to become silent before God. And that is a privilege and a joy. There's one thing about the word stillness. You have to, in your heart, know that it is an invitation Because I'm sure that in our childhoods we all had people saying, will you just be still? And actually, when God asks us to be still, it's a gentle asking. And it's not aggressive, it's just a gentle joining of the never-ending substratum of peace. My function now is to light a candle which represents the peace of the self, the inner light in each person. And then I will hand over to Anne, who will start our first moment of stillness by sounding on the Tibetan bowl. Thank you very much.
So Marcus, I think you're on now.
I think the next thing is to ask the three conversationalists to come and join me on the stage, and then I'm just going to say a little bit to introduce each of you. So I think the would-be bishop should come first. Jackie's being interviewed about her views about the bishops of the church.
I know anything about bishops of the church.
As you've said it like every 8 times this morning, you don't have to say it again.
By the 8th time, I was getting quite used to talking about something I had no idea.
So while the speakers are getting settled, I'd just like to, I mentioned about this very beautiful expression of art that many of you saw as you came in, and we have actually the artist sitting in the front here. Catherine, would you just like to stand in case people want to just connect with you in the break or something? So this beautiful art by Kathleen Dutton. And it's been inspired by Raj Yoga meditation, which is the meditation that we practice here at the Brahma Kumaris. So while they're settling,
We're not very well behaved,
So each of their bios were, there's a lot in them, and I don't know them all too well as individuals, so I'll just share a little bit of, all of their bios could be really, really long, so how do you introduce them? So I'll start with Rabbi Jackie Tabbit, and she was born in Dublin, so it's nice to have a little bit of kind of background, isn't it? She was born in Dublin, and then she moved to London. I'm not sure what age she moved to London, but apparently when she was about 10, her mother joined the local Reform synagogue in Ilford, and almost from that moment, Jackie got involved in the whole community, and in a lot of the activities of the community. I remember the bit about the brown owl, in the brownies, because I was tawny owl or something in the brownie. Tawny, okay, so that seemed quite a significant thing in your life at that time. But also, she was saying that at that time there was some quite special intellectual rabbis who really gave kind of quite a boost to her journey. One of them was Alan Miller, that she had till she was about 12, and then down Marmer. And so they quite inspired her on her journey. And then she went on to study medieval history at the University College London and specialising in church history, and then did a teacher training course. So you can see how all these things are now so important on her current journey. And then she went to Leo Bayer College, and in 1975 she became the first woman rabbi in this country, in this country, in the UK. So that is an amazing achievement, isn't it? And now she worked in the West London Synagogue till 1998, and then she joined the NWSS. So I looked that up, and it's the Northwest Surrey Synagogue. So thank goodness for Google. So I was in Oxford, I couldn't ask. So she has served as the chair of the Assembly of Rabbis, of the Council of Reform and Liberal Rabbis, and as vice president of the Movement for Reform Judaism. Her other main interests lie in social justice, in the interfaith realm as well. She is patron of the Jewish Council for Racial Equality, on the executive of the Interfaith Network, and was until recently chair of the World Congress of Faith. She's a family person, married, and has children. So thank you, Jackie, Rabbi Jackie, for being here. And then we have Aisha Khan, that's how you say it, isn't it, Aisha Khan? And from a Muslim background, and who realised faith in her mid-20s, and has been on a continuous journey ever since. And she too said that she was blessed with excellent teachers, and so there's quite a thing there that somehow people inspire you. And she said that helped her to really grow inwardly and also in her outward practice. And she's at present teaching GCSE religious studies and has developed the Islamic Studies curriculum at An-Nissa Society's supplementary Muslim school. She is one of the founding members and chair of the Brent Multi-Faith Forum, and she works with faith communities and statutory agencies towards creating interreligious dialogue and understanding of interfaith. She's a presenter, workshop leader, and she has done many, many talks and presentations on understanding the Muslim faith, but also about bringing better understanding of Islam to help with interfaith cohesion. So again, you can see already there's a lot of experience, these two. And then Marcus's bio was very lengthy. So I have to praise you. I was good at that at school. That was the one I did well at, praise you. Anyway, patron of the International Interfaith Centre and co-founder of the Three Faiths Forum and peace counsellor and author, and he's written many, many books. I'll tell you about a few of those a bit later. Reverend Dr. Marcus Braybrook is a retired Anglican parish priest living in Oxford. He's been involved in interfaith for, it says, over 40 years, and especially through the World Congress of Faith, which he joined in 1964, and of which he is now the president. He was executive director of the Council of Christians and Jews from 1984 to 88, and he is co-founder of the Three Faiths Forum. He has travelled widely, and in these travels he spent time in India and Israel, and in 2004 he was awarded the Lambeth Doctorate of Divinity by the Archbishop of Canterbury in recognition for his contribution to inter-religious dialogue and cooperation and bringing that understanding into the world. Many, many books. I think he's written over 40 books. I'm just going to highlight a few of them, and there's one that's just recently, How to Understand Judaism, what we can learn from Hinduism, Christian-Jewish dialogue, the next steps. And his latest book is Beacons of Light, 100 Holy People Who Have Shaped the History of Humanity, and that's now available. He's also married, and his wife is here, who's a social worker and magistrate, and they have 2 children and 6 granddaughters. And just give that feel that they're family people. And I didn't ask if you were a family person. She's married to, so you know, this is important too, that they're family people. And then we have Sister Maureen, who I've known for 20 years, so hard to introduce Maureen, but her official title is Programme Director for the Brahma Kumaris for the UK. But Maureen's involved in many, many outreach programmes and community services and dialogues, prison service, working with youth, women's programmes, but has been so involved for so many years in interfaith dialogue, and that's why Marcus knows her so well, because for years and years they've been going to similar events, really, and working together in Turkey. So you can see that they all have, I'm sure, very interesting backgrounds and probably a lot to share on this subject. So without spending more time, let the conversation begin.
Well, first of all, then, thank you for all your research and your very kind introductions. So, really what we're going to sort of share a conversation, and as the afternoon goes, others I think of you will be joining in. And our theme is For the Love of the Divine. And it's interesting, in just a sort of momentary conversation with a couple of you, are we thinking about, I'm able to use the word God as well as the divine, of God's love for us, or our love for God? And then I was thinking perhaps all love is mutual, but it's always a two-way process. But the other thought came to me, looking at this lovely pictures of a film, Chasing God. I was actually really wondering whether myself I feel closest to God when I'm in the midst of religious rituals, or perhaps closer sometimes in the beauty of nature, or Jesus said, whatsoever you do for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you do for me. And sometimes it's in that context of service to others, receiving love from others, giving love, that I feel closest. And I take some comfort from my question in that there's an experience in the book of Isaiah's great experience of the holiness of God. Holy, holy, holy. But it came after the end of evening worship. So, perhaps really let's sort of begin. Jackie, do you want to start? When do you feel closest to God?
It's very hard, actually, to pinpoint one area, because I think it's all three that you mentioned. But also, moments in one's life, like when you've given birth to holding your child. That's an amazing feeling of love. And I think you're right. Love has to be reciprocal. And in Judaism we talk about a covenant between us and God, and covenants too are reciprocal things. I think sometimes it's very difficult when you're in charge of a ritual to feel close to God, which is why I sympathise with Isaiah's notion it was after the evening service. Yes. Because if you're in charge of liturgy, then your job is to make sure that the experience is good for everybody who's seated there. And it's not really, it's selfish in a sense to be too much looking to yourself, I think. Though there are sometimes moments, I was thinking maybe of Yom Kippur, which is the Day for Atonement. There's a prayer halfway sort of through the day, which is a prayer for the person leading the service. And in our synagogue, the custom is the rabbi to go up to the ark to read that prayer. And it's as if you are closing away everybody else who's around. And for a moment during that day, having that connection. And acknowledging then the responsibility you bear for what's happening around you. But it also can be at the beginning of the service in a different way, where there's a lovely meditation you're supposed to do, where when you stand in front of a community or in front of a group of people, that you look round and you remind yourself that each person is made in the image of God. And that can be very powerful, especially when there's people that you don't like. And you have to remind yourself, they too are made in the image of God. And it can be quite important to say that.
Would you want to share a little your background, where you feel closest to the divine?
I think it could be anywhere, and it could be at any time, and it really just depends on my state of being, whether I remember that I am in His presence, and feel that whatever it is that I'm doing is out of love for Him, but He's allowing me to do it out of His love for me as well. So, in a way, I could do my ritual prayer, like as a Muslim I'm required to do 5 times a day. And sometimes all I'm doing is just standing up, bowing down, waiting, without any connection with what I'm doing, because I'm not just in a state of being, really, at that time. But there are other times when I could be cooking a dinner, just thinking about just the blessing of being, just cooking and feeding the family or other people that can just sort of overwhelm you and empower you. So I think it's just about constantly reminding myself and working on myself to have that love inside of me, because it's not static. It can change from one time to another. And the middle of the night, the prayer can be just absolutely beautiful, because there is no distraction. We're sort of encouraged to do that. So there's nobody else there. There's no one else there, just between you and your Creator. So it's something that I think love is not static, but it's something that needs to be worked on continuously. It's a constant challenge within ourselves to remember who we are. And like I said, remember the others who are also creation of the one Creator. So just constantly remembering who other people are, even the ones that you don't like. We don't like you either. So yeah.
Lovely to hear you. I also like this term, remembering. We often use it when we talk about the connection with God. We often use the word remembrance. And it's remembrance not in the sense of we have to remember something, but it's can you hear me right now?
No.
The mic is not.
There's an echo.
Yes, that's good. Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's some people. It's a remembering in the sense of awakening something that's deep within the soul. I use the word soul because we have our costume, the body, but it's the inner being that functions and it awakens. And so it's like a deep memory of something that then is so familiar and so beautiful, a little bit like coming home. And I especially, and I feel like the energy of God's love at certain times. But like you, the early morning is very beautiful, and actually, if you were to come here, if you wish, you're very welcome. If you were to come into this room at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, yes, the doors are open, not these ones, the other ones. You'd find about 20 people at least here, and other parts of the house meditating, and then bigger numbers later on, of course. But that early morning time is we feel a very special time to be with God in that silence. But there are other times, and particularly, as you've all mentioned, that time when you're serving and you really feel that it's God's task
and you're an instrument at that moment. That's a very, very beautiful feeling, and I would say a blessed feeling. You feel blessed at that time. Very good.
Well, thank you. And you realise you're all invited to stay till 4 a.m. And I was in India recently, there was a great sort of celebration in Hindu temple, and it did just go on. And more people were lying out on the floor asleep as part of their devotion. It was that sort of ceremony. Now, I don't want to dominate the conversation, and do feel you could ask each other. I was going to say interrupt, but I hope it doesn't become like this sort of today where John Humphrys never allows anybody to actually answer the question he's asked, because he wants to answer it himself. So a balance between that and... but what I was thinking is that we can share a little bit more what we mean by the divine, by God, because we may or may not be talking about quite the same reality, different pictures. But I'm aware that for a lot of people in our society, they really just don't know what we're on about. And I was thinking back to a mother saying that her child of 5 was asking, who is God? Can I talk to God? Can I see God? And she thought, as I was a clergyman, I would be able to answer the questions, so she should get out of it. So I now want to know what I should have said. I should really like to sort of share some ideas. I was really trying to, well, I think we were getting at what is our picture of God. Are we thinking of God as all loving, or God as judging? Somebody who created the world and forgot about it. I think that's the sort of area we have been interesting to.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about God, when I'm teaching young children, and they're asking, who is God? You know, when I say God is the one who created everything, the universe, us, you, me, everyone in it. And he created us out of his compassion. So even though for me, when we're talking about God, one of his names is Al-Wadud, which is the loving. But it's the Rahman, which we start, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's the Rahman, it's the mercy that really shows his love in creating us. We're also taught, and don't always understand, you know how to say, is God wanted to be known, so he created us. So how do we get to know him? You know? And it's through different things in different ways with different people. But to a 5-year-old, and to adults as well, he is the creator of the universe. And when I'm asked, did he forget about us? No, I don't think so. I don't think he's ever forgotten about us. But I think he did create us with a choice and with the will. So it is up to us to behave and do what is right, or what he would want us to do. And I'm just using the term the sense, not really about the gender, but what God would want us to do. So it is a constant reminder about what our purpose is in life. Because God also said, I did not create man but to worship me. So how do we worship him? Is it just the formal rituals? Or is it in everything else that we do, every step that we take? And also in terms of his other, the creation, you know, the multitude of creation. It's about so many things, and all of it, or it could sometimes just be one. You know, so in terms of knowing who God is, I think it's just remember that he's the one that has created you, and the creation is with a purpose. It's not purposeless. So just trying to remember that every moment of the day. And he created you out of love. Just remembering that love as well, and giving that love back.
Remembering the story about a child who at school who was drawing something, and the teacher asked, "What are you drawing?" He said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the child said, "Well, they will do after I finish this." Yes, there are the expressions. I do, I think we all sort of agree with each other or feel with what we're saying. But yes, God didn't forget us, or doesn't forget us, but we forget Him very much. And that's the whole challenge, isn't it? You could say the struggle, you could say the journey of keeping the mind free from all the distractions and all the possibilities of getting caught up in our day-to-day life, which is why the whole thing of moments of stillness is so important. Just to stop, because for me, if I just stop and I'm able to just make my mind quiet, even for a few seconds, then God's presence is there, that love is there. It's not an effort then. But it's because I've quietened my mind at that moment. And I suppose in thinking about what God is like, the best concept we have really is that God is light. But it's not that light in the sense of use the term energy, but that light is love, is peace, is purity, is wisdom. So it's like God is that purest, highest being. And I think the more we draw on that, the more we do feel fulfilled, we do feel sustained, because other things can sustain us for a while, but that connection can sustain us forever if we keep the connection.
I was reminded of a slightly different version of the story, which I thought Marcus was going to tell, about the mother talking to her child about where God is, and the mother replied, "Well, God is everywhere. So is God in this room? Yes. Is God around me? Yes. Is God in my hand? Yes. Got it." And one wishes it was as simple as that. To try and inject another thought here, because I think we could all talk, all of us, about God as love. But it strikes me, well, there's two things that strike me. One is the modern environmental ecological movement I have found very helpful in helping myself and others to understand what is meant by the unity of God. In the sense that through the ecological and environmental movements we are so much more aware of the connectedness between absolutely everything and every being, and every rock, every tree, every mote of dirt all has place in this universe, and is part of a oneness of purpose, which sometimes, of course, we can pervert, and we do. And we have. And we will continue to, I can sit here and speak about this and then get in my car to drive home. And I'm very conscious how I'm then perverting that. But that very oneness that is behind creation, I find a very powerful notion. But I think we've also, one of the things in the modern world we've lost is, at least I've lost maybe, or I don't know, is the sense of awe. And we can go around talking about God loving us, but there's also the God who hides God's face from us. And it isn't so much maybe that God is hiding the face. We're not looking in the right direction. Yeah, we made the face turn. But there is something about awe. There was one of the rabbis said, a modern rabbi saying, talking to God isn't like having a cup of tea with your friends. There's more to it. And I think without that sense of awe, we are losing a great deal. Because I think the sense of awe makes us humble, makes us aware of our place. I live now, the world will live a long time before me, will continue, please God, a long time after me. I think I own my car or my house or whatever. I don't. Ultimately, everything is belonged, is God's possession. And I think we think too much of ourselves sometimes, and that can get in the way too of understanding who that God is. In terms of, one sort of, there's a wonderful hymn we sing at the end of our services called Odonolam, which is the ever-living God of the universe. And the beginning of the prayer talks about God out there. God is great and wonderful and everything. And then the end of the prayer is, and God is with me and my soul and my life. And I think we're very good at talking about the last bit, but we forget sometimes these days the first bit too. And somehow both are necessary for us to have that balance.
Do you think that balance sort of gives you a greater sense of responsibility?
I think so.
Somehow.
Yeah. I mean, in Judaism we very much see that love of God is expressed through love of God's creation. Because after all, if we're all made in the image of God, then in my love for you or you, I'm expressing something of God, of love of God. And ultimately, that has to be the most, to shut myself off and sit and think and dream of God. If I do that too much, then in fact I have neglected to make that love active. And I think understanding that humility is important. You sort of see that eternity, the oneness and the eternity together.
I think what you two thoughts struck me. One is this whole area of God's presence in suffering. But I was also thinking not so much about war, but certainly in some of our traditions there's been a lot more about judgment. We talked about being made in the image of God. Now, I've always been what Christian terms would be called a universalist. I believe in the end God's love is such that all people will be drawn into that love. And there's one medieval mystic who says there can be no heaven whilst there's one soul in hell. That's what you have to have, and that comes in some other traditions. But I'm conscious that some traditions of Christianity have put so much emphasis on sin. It's almost about a picture of a God who's always looking out for what you've done wrong, and that sort of sense of sin and of judgment. My picture is very much more one St. Paul has, that we're called to grow up into the likeness of God, to grow up. Jesus is our first brother. We are to grow up into that likeness. And in one sense, it's rather like, again, you try to play tennis. I have done in the past, but then if you look at Andy Murray's on form, you wonder why you try. So that Jesus, in one sense, is that perfect example. And falling short is recognising how much further we have to go, rather than miserable sinners, etc. Some people know that sort of language, but I don't know whether Judaism now, how much is talked about judgment, but I know you focus very much on this life rather than some of the Christian speculation about what will happen next. But everything links to this, why it's important. It seems to me you can have out of your religion a universal sense that everybody was saved, or you can have, as we've had, onward Christian soldiers, but you're the good guys against the rest of the world which is sinning, and this underlies some of the extremism and fundamentalism. I don't know if it's making sense, or see what
I think there truly is that connection and that experience of God's love, then the expression won't be limited in your life. Just as God wouldn't say, I love this group of people and not that group of people. Then that's not the unlimitedness of God. So I feel that experience of God's love, like you were saying, whether it's the people I like or I don't like, or and that really is the challenge, that love to stay within me for everyone. It's really important. And I don't feel this thing of I feel like God wants to uplift us, and bring us close to Him. Say Him, He, she. And I think that whatever we're doing, and we all make mistakes, and we all do things that we regret. I do, definitely. But if your heart is true, that's what God wants of you. If somebody has a true heart and is sincere in what they're doing, and even if things go wrong, it's like God's hands are there to hold us and keep us moving. So I feel along with that love is that compassion and forgiveness as well. And I have felt that very much at times. So, is that something?
So there's in Hebrew the word for repentance is teshuvah, which is to return. Mm-hmm. And there are two ways that people draw it, the pessimistic way and the optimistic way, you see. And if you think it's sort of a path going up to God, and you commit a sin, and most of the words to do with sin in Judaism mean going away from the path, missing the mark. So you can imagine, you've got a path going up there to God, and you've got a path like that you've taken. Well, the pessimist says that when you return, you go down the path and you're on the same bit again. But there are the optimists who say, well, actually, if you can learn through what you've done wrong, you actually go back to the path on a higher point. And that, I find that a very powerful notion. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I think God is loving and compassionate, but He has set us a guidance about how we should live our lives. And yes, there is something called repentance, and in Arabic it's tawbah, which means that the meaning is the same, you're turning back to God. But it's actually God turning back to you, or turning towards you. So it's a mutual turning. And I agree that one moment of repentance, something that you've done wrong, can take you just straight up, to a much higher plane. We have a saying that God said that His universe cannot contain Him, but yet the heart of a believer, He can fit into the heart of a believer, which is such, you can't even imagine, just can't believe, just sort of learning to live by what would please Him, what would increase our love for Him and His love for us. For He says that when my servant does the devotional acts, He draws close to me, but He draws even closer by all the supererogatory acts that we do. And that's not just the ritual aspects of prayer, but it's in service of others for his sake. It's repenting for the things that we've done to him. And he then becomes the eyes with which we see. We become the eyes with which we see, and the ear in which we hear, and the words that we speak as well. So through him. So it's about sort of learning to continuously go back to him, because as a being we have a tendency to forget, and we forget a lot. You know, the other saying is that a heart is like a mirror. And if you don't constantly polish that mirror, it has a tendency to get rusty, so you have to keep polishing it all the time. And the prayer and the remembrance is part of that polishing. But I do think that the injustices are committed by people. There is a concept of sin. You know, otherwise we would all be living in a
Messianic era, or whatever.
We're not.
We call it.
We're not.
Or golden age.
Or golden age.
But you know, I think it's a saying, because we have a similar saying, that if you take one step of courage, and God takes 1,000 steps towards you, and I think it's in the Hadith, it says, you go to him walking, he comes to you running. And that always moves me very much. It's like the eagerness of God. You know, I just take a little step, and it might be so little, but it really is something of sincerity. And then, you know, in a sense, it's like God is very innocent. He doesn't then, whatever you've done, forget all of that, you know, okay, I'm here for you. You know, so.
See God in all of this. The problem is that we actually have to see God in what we do now, because you can't. You know, I mean, one has these wonderful moments of a mountain top looking over, or walking through a forest, or seeing a little flower, or but we can't do that all the time.
Yeah, you know, do some of the time just to remind yourself.
But you know, so we have to see God actually and feel God in our everyday lives. There's a gorgeous story. It's one of my favourite stories of a man who, a wealthy man sitting in synagogue and listening to the Torah reading, and he was half asleep, as one gets in synagogue sometimes. If you're not taking the service, you can drift off. And he was drifting off, and he sort of, as he was coming to, he heard the bit about, from the Torah, about how in the temple of old in Jerusalem, there were breads that were taken into the temple, onto the showbread table, it was called, for God. And he thought, God wants bread. So what did he do? He went home, and it was coming up to Friday, and he made a beautiful challah, a beautiful special platted loaf for God. And he went back to the synagogue, and he put it in the ark. Here, God, I brought you your bread. Half an hour later, the poor man in the community walks into the synagogue. He's thinking to himself, what am I going to do? I've got no food at home. You know, the Sabbath is coming. What can I do? And he smells this bread and follows the smell, opens the ark and sees the bread. Wow! God, you heard my prayer! He takes the bread and goes home. And of course, the rich man then thinks, I'm an idiot! What are they going to say when they open the ark and see the bread inside? I'm a stupid idiot. He rushes back to the synagogue, and it's gone. God, you really wanted my bread. So every week, you know, he thinks to himself, well, God, you know, I'm going to give you 1 raisins in this week, or I'm going to give you 4 next week. And every week the poor man comes in and says, oh God, this is wonderful! What a story! It's gorgeous stories, until of course the new rabbi comes. New rabbis always get things wrong, and he sees, it's the male rabbi of course who gets it wrong, not he sees, of course, he sees the whole thing happen, because he's there, and he watches the rich man come in and put the breads in, and then he watches the poor man come in and take the breads out. And he calls them into his office and says to them, do you know what? and they're crestfallen. Do you mean God didn't want my bread? And the other one says, do you mean it wasn't God who provided? That's terrible, isn't it? This rabbi, and he thought, he said, no. He said, you don't understand. And he took the hand of the rich man and the hand of the poor man, and he said, these are the hands of God. These are the hands of God. You have allowed this relationship. Because the giving and the taking, both are the hands of God. So, that's my favourite story.
I'm wondering, difficult as it is, whether we need to talk a little about the suffering and the injustice of the world, which I think for many is very difficult. And I suppose I'm also thinking about this growing concern, dementia, and how when somebody is sort of, you see somebody who you love who really seems to cease to be a person, it must make it very difficult to feel the sort of sense that God is still real and present. I don't know, sort of area feeding after that the injustice and suffering, because I think in the depth of all our religions is that even in suffering, God is present, or in the darkness. And I think once when I was staying at Rishikesh, which some of you know, one of the sort of holy sites in India, I was staying at this, we all had to get up very early for sort of morning devotions, and that was, I was trying to enter into it. And suddenly, there was total darkness. This was part of the point. All the lights were turned out, and we were in the darkness, I suppose, real darkness for something like an hour before the dawn. And it helped me to realise that somehow, to discover the presence, one sees it obviously for Christians in the cross, the most horrid form of death, has for Christians become the symbol of God's love. But how do we sort of hold on and discover and share with others that the evil, the suffering they're going through, it may even there find God's presence? And I think very often people do say they're surprised what strength they have received. But I think for many people, who are sort of questioning, this is an area that makes it difficult for them. I mean, Maureen, do you have any?
I suppose the best thing to do is share personal experience, really, of being on a journey with someone who died of cancer. And she was a BK student, but a good friend, we'd worked together and, done a lot of things together. And I guess I kind of made a commitment in my mind that I'm going to be on this journey with her. And it sort of cost me a lot in a way, but it taught me a lot about how God can be present in such a situation. And I remember being with her one day, and she was immensely courageous, as some people in this room were talking about, that she was immensely courageous, and she was a meditator, and she really held on to her experience of God through that time. I remember at one point being with her before she was in hospital, but she was at home still. And I thought to myself, and I would converse with God a lot about it, because I was trying to figure out, how do you want to use me? How do I move here? It was, although I'd sort of been connected, but not so intimately as at that point. And of course, Study Janki was also, mentoring and helping and really encouraging me to serve and be with her. And I thought to myself one day, the best thing I can do for her is to stay happy. And on the one hand, it was like an odd thought, somebody's dying and they're suffering. But I knew that she needed that atmosphere of a good state of mind around somebody. And so that made me, in a sense, gather that inner strength to stay connected to God. So that when I was with her, I could really, and not just when I was with her, because of course it's no use me, oh yes, putting on a brave face, being there and then crying when I go home, because then she would feel that sorrow, because, vibrations reach people. How does God reach us? It's not that there's a sort of human being and, it's energy, it's vibrations. And so that really made me garner a lot of strength to say, okay, if this is what's required of me, I'm going to do my best. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot through it. I learned a lot about how to serve, actually. It taught me a lot. And so when I've been in similar situations since, I've understood better how to serve and how suffering can either be suffering and sorrow, or it can actually be a means of healing. And so even though she passed on because the body, couldn't last, but she did there was a lot of healing that happened in her soul. I watched her heal her relationships, so many things, and she left so peacefully. So it was like I understood something much deeper. It's not just, oh dear, somebody's died. No, it was a healing journey. And of course, if you understand, as I do believe in the eternity of the soul, then I know that the journey hadn't stopped. It is hard when people just believe that's it. Then it seems senseless. But when you understand the continuity, and I guess that was in a very practical way one of the biggest lessons I've had. And of course, I've also watched Daddy in these situations, how she gives that, support to people through love and good wishes and vibrations. And she knows that if she becomes sorrowful, that service is no longer there. So it's a whole other understanding of this right answer.
I think your question about evil and suffering, there are so many dimensions to this. And one is what you mentioned about illness and people going through things like cancer and other conditions. And it can be quite heartbreaking to watch that, or to watch somebody go through that. And you're right, it is about making sure that you can serve God through serving the person. But there are other sorts of suffering and evil that are committed by people. And we've seen numerous wars and what they do to individuals. And, when you see a young child, a 4-year-old, who's been killed because you just think, how can you justify this? Where is it? And I've seen a number of young people question that if God did exist, why would he allow that to happen? And at times like that, it is very difficult to answer that question. When you see adults, it's somehow easy. When you see sort of very young children, it is very difficult to witness something like that. But I also believe, in one of the things that I do say, that if God has created us with the free will, then if he intervenes every time something is not very pleasant or not very nice, where's the freedom of the free will and the choice within all of that? But I think it's something that's been given to us to exercise. So when you see injustices that are committed, then it's up to us to also try and somehow correct it or stop it where we can. And it's not fighting fire with fire and just get one big massive fire in that case, but it's trying to put out the fire somehow and try and build some sort of a peace. And that's the free will, that I think that's the choice that we have, in situations such as that. But I think there are lots of different types of suffering that come, and some of them are to test us, and death is something that is going If anything, we're certain of anything in life, that is one of the things that we are certain of. And I also believe that this life, the soul's journey in this world, is only a part of that journey. That journey is not complete, and it will continue after death. And the state that we lived in will die in the state that we lived in, will be resurrected in the state that we died. So it's about ensuring that regardless of other things around us, is that we are, or work towards being in a state of being from the one that created us. Yeah. And I do think it's a challenge. When you see senseless deaths and some of the evil that really is around, you can't deny that it's not there, it is there. It's hard. It is hard.
I mean, I suppose for our community, sorry, it's the experience of the Holocaust, which is so much part of our history. Most Jews you meet will have had family or friends' family who died in the Holocaust or experienced the Holocaust, so it's very much part of our being. And yet you can't allow that to sour relationships that you have to build up for peace in this world now. But I teach GCSE Judaism, as you teach it, as GCSE Islamic Studies, and one of the areas is the Holocaust, and it's very hard for the kids. Excuse me. Which, as I said, many of them have got many of them, their grandparents came over to England to escape the Holocaust or at the end of the Holocaust. And there are those schools of thought that say the Holocaust definitely proves there is no God and there is no love of God. There are those schools of thought within Judaism which would say, like Marcus, sort of the more fundamentalist groups would say it's because of sin, our sin, that God allowed the Holocaust to happen. And in fact, there's one group of theologians who link it with the rise of Reform Judaism, because Reform Judaism started in Germany and the Holocaust began there. So they see that as a direct. But I tend to go for those who say, as you do, that there is free will, and that if God acted and stopped it, then the free will has stopped. And that because some people are evil, yes, we suffer. And somehow that suffering I can come to terms with more easily than the cancer suffering, or the young child, being killed somehow suffering. That's much harder. Much, much harder. And the only thing I've found over the years is just to be with that person, or be with their family. When the death has occurred, to be there for them. And we have a custom of prayers in people's homes after there's been a death. And some people, out of nervousness, come in and crack jokes, because they don't know what to do.
Being there.
But being there, really being there. And what Jewish law says is you don't open your mouth until the person who's mourning opens theirs. You just be there, and then they can talk.
I think we should open up for some other comments and questions. So.
What we thought we'd do is, before we go, just like to have a moment of stillness, because I think some really powerful topics have been covered: the awe of God, the love of God,
what we do in kind of suffering, how we relate to God in those times. So I think it'd be quite nice to have a moment of stillness, because so we can absorb some of these very powerful things, and I'm sure they, in their own way, they relate to our own lives in quite big ways. Storytelling reminded me of a little story, so I'll start with this. And there was parents, and they had a toddler, and then they were expecting another baby, and so the toddler kept asking the parents, when the baby's born, can I see the baby? I want to see the baby. So this started like a little bit, as if the baby, got near to the birth, quite insistent that as soon as the baby's born, I want to see the baby, I want to see the baby. So they kind of thought, okay, let's hope, because it happens, toddlers, sometimes they're a bit jealous of the new baby, aren't they? So anyway, they said fine, but they set up a little intercom system so they could be aware of what's happened. So they let once the baby was home and everything, they let the toddler go in and see the baby. So the toddler runs over to the cot and says, baby, quick, tell me about God, because I'm forgetting.
Sorry, but I think it's probably to a strange Jewish superstition about that. That's why we have this mark here. That before we're born, we know everything. And then God, or one of God's angels, places a finger over us to shut us up. And that's that we stop knowing everything. We spend the rest of our lives trying to find out what it was with you.
So I think there's been a very rich conversation, and I don't know if it's invoked any questions in you, but here we have. So am I using? Is there another? Okay.
What I suggest is, we've only got about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, is perhaps we have 2 or 3 questions, and then you can pick the one you think you can answer.
So do you want to, are you suggesting, Marcus, that we get
just about questions? 3 questions.
Now, and then it goes into more like a discussion again. Okay, so...
Yes.
So first question.
Thank you. Actually, I do know 3 of the panelists quite well. What question was, many years back, Sister Aisha, I was having a conversation with a number of Muslim friends. And as you know, in Islam, we are God's creation. But we do not believe that we are part of God. Now, how would you explain that? That some people actually do believe that we are part of God.
Okay.
We'll take another couple.
Yes. So is there anyone else who's got a question? It can be something completely different. Oh, here, over here. And I think we've got our 3rd one over there.
Hi, this is just an open question. How do any of you understand the idea of karma, and how do you reconcile that with the suffering to particular regions or particular peoples of the world?
That's a whole topic for another day almost.
From whatever the panel has said, I have not been able to understand the true meaning of God. God is not all love. He is a destroyer as well. He destroys evil. Also, the panel has said that we pray 5 times a day. Life itself is a prayer. And to understand God is to understand our own spirit, our own self, because in it lies the characteristics of God. Now,
can I ask, do you have a question, or are you making more like a comment?
How do you define God? How do you tell a child of 5 years old, take a Bible, take a Gita, or take a Quran? Then how do a child would understand God? So what sort of atmosphere are we creating for the understanding of that great truth? And life itself should be a prayer, it should not be a separate subject that you go and pray.
Okay, I think those are quite 3 big ones, so I think that's probably enough for yours.
I just get it back to the start.
Whichever. I don't really need each of us answer everything.
Can I just answer the first question in terms of are we part of God or is God part of us? I think we are told that the Spirit was breathed into us when we were in the wombs of our mothers. So it's as simple as that. It's a spirit that comes as the root, the spirit that comes from God. I don't think we're part of God. So that's the first one. The second one, the karma one, I think is going to be a bit more difficult to answer, because what is destiny? How do we know what our destiny is? Is it my destiny that I go home straight after, or how much of it is left to my freedom of choice, my free will? I think that it's intertwined, and that subject is a really complicated and a complex one. I'm not sure that I can answer it at all. But I do think that what we have is the freedom to choose to do what is right as and when, and the rest we just, the decisions and all of that, what was destined and what will be is left to God. I can't see into the future, and I can't see into the bigger picture either. In terms of praying 5 times a day, the 5 times a day are the different days, different times in a day that were broken up. But you're right, our whole day should be an act of worship. It's an act of prayer. But I think in terms of the 5 ritual prayers that we should be doing, or that we're told to do as Muslims, is that during that time we leave whatever it is that we're doing. And for those few moments, we prepare for the prayer, the ritual ablution, which is all a form of reminding and remembering. So as mankind, as humankind, as people, we do tend to forget. So those times are times that we do forget to remember, and we continue with the remembrance from one time to the next. So it's not that we forget once that 5 prayer is over. But those are the 5 times that are broken up in the day. What do you give your child? I give my child the Quran. I teach them from the background that I come from the knowledge and the wisdom that I have. But I always tell my child, I've always taught my children to respect all creation of God and have respect for other people's beliefs and faiths, because that's what theirs is. You want to do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. That's what I do. I hope that answers that very simply, because I'm really conscious of the time.
Boy, you answered 3 in one go. That's not bad. You're watching the time, yes. The questions, as you say, are all ones that we could spend many hours on. I don't believe that I am made up as part of God, though I do hope that there is something of God's teachings within me. I would hope that. I would find it too proud a statement, I think, to say that there is a part of God in me, if you see what I mean, or that I'm part of God. I couldn't cope with that statement, I don't think. In terms of karma, of course, is one looking also at the notion of karma following through different lifetimes? I don't know quite what you were hoping for in that question.
Just a general, what you take believe as karma, whether it's a punishment for your actions, or whether it's a more kind of progressive statement or idea?
I don't think I understand karma enough to answer your question. That's my problem. I am aware that within Judaism, because I'm into the ecological movement, I do tend to believe that the soul continues and is reborn and learns and lives. Because I like that notion that I cannot believe that God would waste the soul having, just on earth once, if you see what I mean. So I rather like that. And there is a notion in Judaism that there are some mystics who have propagated that idea. And so, does one have a life hanging over you because of what you did in a previous life? I don't know. I'm not sure whether that's what you meant. There's a wonderful saying of one of the rabbis that says, everything is in the hands of God and free will is given. Which means that you live in a creative tension all the time. That you are, unless you act as though you had total free will, then all the ideas of judgment or forgiveness or whatever make no sense. You have to act as if you have total free will. But I'm also aware that I don't. However much I wanted to, the way I'm made, I could never have been a ballet dancer. On that sort of real low level, yes? And, well, there's just no way. So there are things within us, our genes, if you like, that do make us partly who we are. But I hang on to free will, because otherwise I don't feel my life has meaning. And I want to have that freedom of will. But I'm also aware that sometimes in societies, I think you mentioned people being born into difficult circumstances. One of the things that I found easier as life has gone on, in a sense, is understanding that an enormous amount of the natural catastrophes that happen in this world are not that natural. It's because we've perverted the ecology and the environment that has caused landslides, or is causing the terrible storms and floods. And therefore, I see my free will as something that I should be acting to try and do something to prevent that. If that makes sense. It helps me. There is a mystical teaching in Judaism about God creating the world through the presence of light and passing God's light on, the divine light, and that bits of that light have got trapped in the world. And it's the job of all of us to find those shards of light and release them to make this world a better place. And that gives my life a certain meaning. I hope that helps a bit. As for the gentleman over there, yes, for me very much, love of God is through love of humanity and acting to help humanity. And I suppose with a 5-year-old, it's whatever you tell a 5-year-old, you're in trouble, because they're going to take it literally. And so I think you have to be very careful that you only tell them things you believe, because they also spot it if you tell lies. So you have to be very careful. And it's okay to say to a child, I'm not sure I understand. In fact, I know I don't understand everything that is about God, because I'm incapable of it. But meanwhile, this is how we act. And that's what I tend, through stories or through projects or programs, to involve the children in worship and in doing good deeds, and in knowing our history, knowing our stories, and through them letting them experience something of the myriad of different aspects of God that there are in this world. That's mine.
Yes, I think what I've learned from Karma, which is not from my sort of study of Hinduism, it's made me, I think, more aware of the responsibility and the consequence of our actions. And I mean, I think we see this if one takes, the sort of ethical investments, what we buy, but we really are interconnected across the world. And the products we buy here, we buy so cheaply that people in other parts of the world are being exploited. So I think I will take that. I mean, I think my real picture, I remember once Ed Prakash asking me about this, whether I believed in reincarnation. And I think I said that I really believe all of us are on the journey towards God. And maybe for some of us we come back here, I don't think we know. I mean, there are some people who seem to feel we can remember something of a past life. The difficulty, I think, for some of us is if we don't remember what we're being punished for, if we were born to very great poverty because of something you did in the past which you don't know what it was, there seems to be some sort of moral problem about that. But I would say it's a positive teaching, not what it's to blame our misfortune or karma, but to see that how we live, always we have the opportunity to change, and by that change to help others, and in so doing free ourselves from some of the past. Have we left through plenty? We've still got questions, but unanswered.
No, I just think it's amazing how much, we all are, we look at these deep spiritual concepts where it's so much in tune. I mean, it really is wonderful. I also feel that we're not a part of God in that sense. God creating us in his own image, or her own image, is not that because we have a head and 2 arms and 2 legs and a human form that that's what God is like, but more that the qualities within God, that the love, the peace, the wisdom, the joy, the compassion, these are mirrored in the soul. But they become buried because the soul has become weak, basically. And when you're, when you feel weak, even in your day-to-day life, you get more affected by things. So it's like you can see in the world generally souls have become quite weak, which is why there is so much anger or lack of tolerance or fear. But when we remember God, we are able to again uncover those qualities that God gave us when he created us. Karma is a very big subject, as we've all been saying. And I think for me, karma is very much about the intention with which you do an action. And that's why sometimes it's not always clear why a particular action may lead to a particular result, because it's not necessarily about what you can see externally. An action may appear good, but if the motive within is of ego or of greed or of some kind of desire to exploit another, even though on the surface it may seem kind, but there's a manipulative aspect to it, which actually then makes it a bad action or a negative karma. And I think this is not so much, sometimes we don't understand karma in that deep sense, that it really is about the deep intention with which we perform an action. And I agree with Jackie that, when we look at the world and the calamities and things that are happening, they are statistically increasing. One is because of the physical exploitation, but also it's our thoughts. It's the collective effect of very negative consciousness. And there is a lot of anger and violence and greed in the world that is sitting within human minds. And that is having an effect literally upon matter. And so that is a dimension that's, something to be very aware of. So, one is that, and this connects with your other question, that of your whole life being in prayer, it's not just that I will be good and remember God when others can see me, but it's something for my whole life. But yes, if I take those times to stop, that will replenish me, that will help me to make my life a whole life of prayer. So both are necessary. Of course, I do, in the Raja Yoga teachings, we do believe in rebirth of the soul, and that, in a sense, how karma is carried is really through tendencies. So, you know, if I perform a particular kind of action in one life, then I carry with me the tendency to do the same in another life. So I don't see so much as a kind of punishment in that sense, that, you know, but I'm drawn to similar situations, or I act with that same tendency, whether it's of goodness or of arrogance, or it becomes a trait within that I've reinforced within myself in one life. But again, that, and this we're all agreeing with everything, you know, again, that Marcus is saying, I don't see karma as a fatalistic thing. Oh, it's my karma, then I can't do anything. And in some parts of Hinduism, that's how it's taken. But it actually is something to empower us to say, it's in my hands at this moment to perform elevated karma in remembrance of God with that pure intention. And then in doing so, I can actually change the trajectory of my destiny. And I think that's very, very important. And so whatever circumstance I may be in, and I may not know why, but I can know a principle, but I know the principle that change is definitely possible. So that for me, it has been very, very important in my life personally. So the destiny and free will, this constant tension, but like you say, you absolutely have to act as if free will is there for you. So I guess, of course, many more aspects.
I think this is where we have to end this part of the session, don't we? Can I just say thank you to all the panelists?